Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, joined by Rob Dunham.
Wearing my hat even in defeat.
Yeah, FA Cup final didn't go so well.
No, this is not a Cup Losers podcast.
This is not a Cup Losers podcast. I wouldn't know. It's been a while. Actually, it's not. It's 4 years. I mean, that's still a long time. But this is not a soccer podcast, a griping podcast, or a Cup Losers podcast.
I've got some problems with you people.
Yes, we'll save that for Festivus. All right. But it is a movie podcast, and we've got an excellent movie podcast for you. We will, of course, break down the box office for this week. We will talk about the two main movies coming out. We are going to give you our feedback on Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol as part of our running series, and, of course, our watch list. All right, Rob, you ready to get started?
I am ready.
Let's do it. All right, so box office, everyone. Little Mermaid, to the surprise of no one, finished first in the box office. It did 118 million, so not bad. I think they were projecting a little bit more for it, but 118 million is not bad in its first week. Fast X finished 2 in its second week and did 28.53 million. Guardians of the Galaxy was third at 26.8 million. Super Mario Brothers still in the top 5 at 8.2 million, and The Machine in its first week 5.8. I think that was your pick of the movies.
Yeah.
The second run movies was The Machine, and you were right. Number 5.8. What do you make of box office?
Yeah, not surprising.
Yeah.
There are very few weeks that are surprising.
At this point, there really are.
Yeah.
Sometimes the number is a bit surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Super Mario Brothers was an example of that. There was another one recently where like, huh, did it really?
Yeah.
Is that all it did?
Yeah.
But yeah, what did you make of the number for Little Mermaid?
I think that even if they expected a little more, I think it's a realistic, good opening weekend for it. I just don't think there's a ton of demand for the live action Disney stuff, but apparently there's enough of a demand that there's almost $120 million worth of people going to see it.
Well, and honestly, that's been the biggest beef of this whole remake of live action is it seems like a cash grab.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people seem to fall for that cash grab every time. So
I mean, that being said, a couple of the more recent ones, like Lady and the Tramp and I believe Pinocchio, were released straight to Disney Plus. So I wonder internally what their feelings are about how much money it's made.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see how well it does. Second weekend's on. That's always a big gauge as to popularity as to how much it drops off. Normal is 55 to 60%. So if you see less than that, then it's had a good second week. Yeah, we'll see. Going forward, this weekend, we have a couple of new movies. I know both of us are going to see at least one of them this weekend.
I'm going to see both of them. Maybe not this weekend, but I will see both of them.
Yeah. And that are the two that have come out, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So this is the second installment of the animated Spider-Man movies starring Miles Morales as Spider-Man and featuring the Spider-Verse. So the cast here is Shamik Moore is Miles Morales, Haley Steinfeld is Gwen Stacy, Oscar Isaac, Miguel, Jake Johnson plays one of the plays Peter, Issa Rae, Spider-Woman, Brian Tyree Henry. So basically, this is, like I said, this is the second installment. The first one was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. This is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. The story here is Miles Morales catapults across the multiverse where he encounters a team of spider people charged with protecting its very existence. When the heroes clash on how to handle the new threat, Miles must redefine what it means to be a hero. So that's kind of the plot line of this one. The second one is The Boogeyman. And The Boogeyman is starring Sophie Thatcher, Chris Messina, Vivian Lyra Blair. And this is a horror movie, and it is still reeling from the tragic death of their mother. A teenage girl and her younger sister find themselves plagued by a sadistic presence in their house and struggle to get their grieving father to pay attention before it's too late. The Boogeyman. Okay. Rob, thoughts?
So I want to see both these movies. I'm actually seeing The Boogeyman this Saturday tonight. Stephen King book.
Yes.
So anytime Stephen King comes out, I like to make sure I check it out. And this is probably, since I have gotten more into actually going to the horror genre, having the more ability to do that, this is probably the one I'm most been looking forward to. I would say the only one that would be rivaling it comparison would be Nope, but Nope was more like thriller slash horror. This is more of like a straight.
Yeah, this is gonna be straight up horror.
Yeah. In fact, there was one news story that came out that they had to change the ending because it was too scary for the people. They weren't prepared for the reveal, and it was disturbing to people. So that's fascinating to me. I'm really interested in seeing what that all looks like. But Across the Spider-Verse, I'm also very excited for because I loved Into the Spider-Verse. Lord and Miller, fantastic job with that movie, and really interested in seeing what they can do with the follow-up. And this is really interesting to me because we've talked often about how like there are certain genres of movies that have like this niche audience that you're guaranteed like X amount of money. And these are two movies from two distinct versions of those genres.
Yeah.
So are we going to see two movies do $50+ million in the same weekend?
Yeah.
Which I expect Spider-Verse to do 3 digits.
Yeah.
Opening weekend. I think that The Boogeyman could do north of 40. Because I think there's a huge audience for Stephen King and there's a built-in horror audience. I think those things combined push it over at least over 30.
Yeah, a decently promoted horror movie. I mean, we've seen it is almost guaranteed at least 25 million on every weekend. So it would not be surprising to see over 40 million for this one. Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're going to see triple digits for Spider-Man into the Spider-Verse. The only thing is with Little Mermaid being in its second week, maybe there's enough siphoning off the younger, preteen audience that maybe it's a little split.
I'm very interested in seeing some comparison numbers after this weekend with like the year so far. Weekend wise, because this weekend is set up to be probably the biggest weekend of the year, considering the movies that are coming out and the fact that kids are getting out of school. Like this should be a huge weekend in the box office.
I would think so.
Now, the question is, it doesn't always happen. Will it happen? But everything is lined up for this to be a huge weekend in the box office.
Remind me about that for next week. I'll check it out. Because Box Office Mojo does a great job where you can just compare weekends and compare that across the year.
Yeah, this is definitely not the other weekend where there was Little Mermaid and 5 movies no one's ever heard of.
Yeah, it's amazing because I mean you often see this in movies where it'll be like #1 movie in the world. But there's a big difference between #1 movie in the world at $20 million and #1 movie in the world at $150 million. So, but you still get to claim that if you're #1 that particular week. It will be interesting to see. I recently, normally I'd save this till the end, but since we're talking about Spider-Man, I rewatched Into the Spider-Verse, and it's been a little while since I've watched it. Man, it's so good. It is so good. And I am not normally, it has a little bit almost of an anime bent at times, especially with the one Spider-Man, futuristic Spider-Man character is a straight anime character. But it's visually incredible. It is absolutely visually incredible. But on top of that, it's a really, really well-written story. The character development is real. The family drama, family dynamic, it's relatable and lifelike. It's just really, really well done.
And you've seen a lot, like for a few examples, the Bourne movies with action, the Matrix movies with sci-fi, and Into the Spider-Verse with cartoon animation. These things have all impacted almost every movie in their genre since they came out.
It is by far the most realized comic book style movie. I don't think any movie has done a better job of integrating the comic book style of drawing and the style of animation into an actual live action movie. I mean, it's just amazing how well they did with that. All the layers, all the textures, all the coloration,
the mixing of at times 4 or 5 different styles of animation all in the same scene.
Yeah,
I can't even imagine logistically what that meant for putting it together.
My one beef about Into the Spider-Verse is I thought the ending with the collision of universes in that epicenter just wasn't grounded enough. Like you'd never had a sense of exactly what was happening and what was going on and where it was going. I mean, you could follow it along well enough, but I just didn't think it was grounded enough for you to really gauge what the characters were trying to do in those moments.
Yeah, and that makes me wonder if opening it up in this movie provides more context to the ending of the first movie.
Yeah. Because it honestly, it is just a bunch of things floating all over the place and the characters jumping back and forth.
Yeah.
So just that lack of grounding, I think, is a bit of an issue. But I mean, that it's a minor beef in what is a largely an incredible movie.
Yeah.
So I'm anticipating that Across the Spider-Verse is going to do really, really well.
Yeah.
And they were very pleased with the preview showings and how much money the preview showings made.
Yeah.
So that's something to take away from it, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz around both these movies coming out this weekend. So, like I said, all indications are it's going to be a big weekend.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, that's what's coming out in the box office. So still lots of things out. Guardians, if you haven't seen it. Little Mermaid, if you haven't seen it. Some other indie films. So lots of stuff to see in the box office this weekend. Now I'll just catch you up on a story we did last week. And we talked about the return of MoviePass, where they've now opened it up to the general public. And it's debuted across all of the theaters, basically all the theaters in the country. So it's basically available everywhere now. We talked about the fact that there are different plans and different things like that. Well, while we were recording the podcast, actually, Rob decided it was a good time to sign up for MoviePass.
Yeah, why not? That's not like the present.
Yes, no time like the present. So in the meantime, he's got to play around with the app a little bit. There were a few things we weren't aware of last week that Rob is now familiar. So give us an update on the workings of MoviePass.
So I haven't actually gotten my card yet. It said 10 to 15 business days. So I'll provide another update once I get it and test it out, see if it's functioning the way they say it should function. But in an ideal scenario, the way it works, so you pay a certain amount of money for a certain amount of credits, and there are 3 different tiers. Actually, if you give me 1 second, I can look this up. And you can change. So I'm not going to show you my screen here, but you can change your plan at any point with just a click of the button on that, which is really nice.
That is nice.
So the basic plan is 34 credits, and that's $10 a month. And you can roll over any unused credits for up to 2 months. The standard plan is $20 a month, and that's 72 credits, and you can, same thing, roll over. And then the premium plan is $30, and that's 113 credits. Now, I believe there's a plan above that, but that's not available on the app. So I think that's something they
were limited. Yeah. It said on the website they were limited. There were a limited amount of those.
So I signed up for the standard plan, which is 72 credits. So our question was, what do the credits actually mean?
Yeah. And just in general, our credit was, how does this going to be different than the app that crashed and burned the last time around?
And the one that crashed and burned was because they were letting you go to unlimited amounts of 2D movies.
Yeah.
So you could see a movie and then go to one immediately after it and do that.
And they were having to pay out way too much money.
So the way that this is different, and something that I think bodes well for its future and sustainability. So they're, in my view, they're really focusing on people relying on the flexibility of being able to go to any theater they want to, which I think is a good model for this, because you have to have something distinctive, because AMC has their own plan, Regal has their own plan, and those are tied to that theater. Now, with the AMC and Regal plans, you can go unlimited amount of movies. So you could go to a movie, go to another movie. There's no credit system or anything like that. So with the credit system with this movie, they rank the movies by amounts of points for credits. So it looks like every movie before 11 o'clock in the morning is 10 credits. So if there's like an early showing, like 11 o'clock or earlier, those are worth 10. If there's a showing between them and 4, I believe it is, those are 20. And anything 4 o'clock and on is 30. So basically, any movie you want to go to in the evening would be like a 30 credit movie. Now, there are some variables here. I noticed that some of the second run theaters are less credits. And I also noticed that on Tuesdays, which if you're not aware, and you should be aware if you're watching or listening to a movie podcast, Tuesday is like the standard discount day for movie theaters. They usually offer $6, $7, $8 tickets to the movies. The movies for there, the credit is seven credits. So theoretically, if you only went to movies on Tuesdays and you were on the 72 credit plan like I am, you could go to 10 movies in a month.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to go to like
multiple movies,
2 every Tuesday.
2 every Tuesday. Yeah.
Or if you so I like that it gives you a little flexibility. So like a couple scenarios, you could go to 3 movies that were between 12 and 4 o'clock. In a month, and then go to 1 that was before 12 o'clock. Right. So that gives you 70, and then you roll over 2. Or you go to 2 at night, those at 60, you go to an early one, that's 70, and you roll over the 2. Or you just go to 3, like in the early afternoon, you roll over 12. So it's really just based on what your options and availability are, which I kind of like. Obviously, you're not able to see as many movies as if you were on like a Regal plan or AMC thing. But the other variable in this is realistically, I'm only going to get to 2 to 4 movies a month. With where I am, my stage in life, I'm not going to get to more than that. So this plan like locks me into that amount, and I'm already locked into that amount myself. So I pay a little more to be stuck with the one theater chain, even though it technically opens me up to go to more. When with this, like if I'm on vacation somewhere and there's not a Regal near me, there's not an AMC near me, I can go to whatever theater I want as long as it's on the app. So I think it's very straightforward. I don't think it's confusing. I think I understand why they don't, why it's not like super crystal clear going into it, because I think that, you know, some people wouldn't be happy with it, or like feel like, I don't know. I don't feel like it's misguiding people necessarily, but like for me it works.
The credit system is the thing that I think will be the biggest adjustment for people, but also what makes it more sustainable, because there is an upper limit for you as to the amount of movies a particular individual can go to. So based on the plan you're paying out, there's a very limited amount that you're going to be able to go to in terms of that. And with the evening movies and weekend movies being the higher priced ones in terms of credits, then you're just going to be able to go to less of those.
I mean, depending on your theater. So for instance, the Regal in West Manchester where I live, it's like $11.50 for a nighttime showing. I think out here it's a little more. It's more, it's like 14, it's like 14 or something. So with mine, if I go to 2 night ones, that's $23. If I go to a matinee one, that's still another like $10. So I'm still saving like $10 to $15 a month. And if you're in Lancaster, you're probably saving more like $25 a month by getting the thing. So, you know, it really just depends on where you're at in life, what you're able to do, you know? I'm looking forward to actually getting the card in the mail and testing it out. And making sure that it works the way that you say it's going to work.
So this is something I think it's something to seriously consider if you are a movie buff, and if the app crashes and burns again, no harm done. So, all right. So that's a little update on MoviePass, and we'll probably be back in the near future with another update as we get things going.
One other bonus I like about that, since they put the credit on your card and you use it as like a regular credit card, you also are able to get like points at your movie theater if you have like a Regal subscription or whatever. To help you get like free drinks, popcorn, whatever in the future, or even a free ticket as you go along, which also has to bear into things, because if you just save up your points and use them for free tickets, like you're actually getting even more value. So
totally. All right, so that's a little update on the news, and now we will move to our discussion. And normally we give a break in between these, but based on the schedule, we're just going for it. The fourth installment of our Mission Impossible preview series, leading up to Dead Reckoning Part 1, and which comes out on July 14th. This week we are up to Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol,
aka Mission Impossible
4, which they keep going back and forth on whether they want to put the number in or they don't want to put the number in. The interestingly enough, the studio originally wanted it to be Mission Impossible 4, but both the director and Tom Cruise were like, "Yeah, I don't know that we want to go 4." I think they were also keeping in mind that MI5 and MI6 would confuse people with the actual British spy agencies. So I think they were trying to kind of project ahead on this one. So that's where they started going to titles. So the remaining movies in the series all have titles, but they still throw in the numbers and some of their updated marketing on this stuff. So how we'll do this, like we have with the rest of them, we'll give some basic stats, cast, director, that sort of thing. We'll give some background on the movie. We'll talk about our observations, and we'll get into strengths and weaknesses, memorable scenes, close out with some fun tidbits and things of that nature. So to start out with the basic stats, this was the first Mission Impossible to have a different season release date. This came out December 21st, 2011. So it moves normally from the May timeframe to the Christmas time. So this was a Christmas debut movie. The budget for it was $145 million. The opening weekend is a little strange, and I had to look this up because it just didn't seem real. The opening weekend is credited for only doing $12.7 million.
Wow.
So I'm like, that seems very strange.
Yeah.
So I looked into that, and basically in my research, you realized that this movie, because this was the first one to shoot some of it in IMAX, they did a special IMAX release. So they released the movie a week early just in IMAX. So there were only 425 theaters in the country that had it that first week, but that still gets technically credited as its opening weekend. So it did, that colors a little bit, it did $12.7 million in only 425 theaters. Now, its full release weekend was Christmas weekend. That Christmas weekend extended the 23rd through the 26th. It was in 3,448 theaters. So that's a little bit different, and it did 44 million. So combined, it did, within the first week and a half, 2 weeks, it did like $57 million basically. So that's not bad. Domestically, it did 209 million. Globally, it did 694 million. To the day at this point, this was the biggest movie of Tom Cruise's career. So it had the biggest release, and this was one of the first ones that started to do the shift where these movies started to make more internationally than they started making domestically. So this was a big push. This was something Tom was, and with these movies, was on the forefront of, is trying to maximize the international market for these movies. And so you start to see that and this has started to become a trend all throughout, but this is one of the first movies that really took advantage of the international market to make more money internationally than they made locally.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if this is in your tidbit section, so I haven't had a chance to review it, but this movie actually opened December 7th in Dubai for its opening, its very first opening. And a main reason for that is a large set piece in the movie is in Dubai at the Burj Khalifa. So they released it there specifically before anyone else, which is definitely focusing on the international market, because as Americans, where the studios are, we're used to things opening here first because we're most important.
Yes.
At least that's what we think all the time.
So the cast and director, this movie was directed by Brad Bird. Brad Bird, known for The Incredibles, The Iron Giant, Ratatouille. He was a big Pixar guy. This was actually his first live action movie that he did. So quite the adventure for your first live action movie. Writers are Josh Applebaum and Andre Nemec. Chris McQuarrie came in late and did a bunch of rewrites for it, but didn't do enough rewrites to get a writer's credit. Also, Damon Lindelof of Lost fame and The Leftovers, also another one of those bad robot guys, came in also to do some rewrites as well, but did not get a writer's credit on this one. The main cast here is, of course, Tom Cruise. Paula Patton came in to play an IMF agent. Simon Pegg is back. Jeremy Renner makes his debut in the series. And Michael Nyqvist plays Hendrix, the main bad guy in this particular film. Michael Nyqvist, maybe you've just seen him in the first couple of John Wick movies, or if you are familiar with the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, the Swedish versions, he plays the main guy in the Swedish versions. So he's a Swedish actor. He's dead now, but he was the main bad guy in this one. A little background on this one. Cruise wanted to work with J.J. Abrams again after J.J. Abrams directed Mission Impossible 3, but they do kind of have a thing where they like to use different directors up until that point, but he still wanted to work with J.J. Abrams and Bad Robot. So he brought in the Bad Robot Studios to help him produce the film, and they produced this one. They also produced Rogue Nation as well. And so J.J. Abrams was on the production team, but he was also in the middle of directing Super 8 at the moment. So while this was shooting, he was off directing Super 8. Very good movie, by the way. So Cruise brought in Brad Bird because he really, really enjoyed The Incredibles. And he viewed The Incredibles and he looked at it and was like, this is a guy who understands action. So he was telling Brad Bird, no, you are a live action director. You can do this. Like, this works. And what was interesting, I listened to a couple of interviews with Brad Bird, and he was saying hand-drawn animation versus computer animation is different, because computer animation actually uses similar things to what you would call camera lenses. So they have different aspect ratios to how they do the computer shots versus how they do the live action shots. So there is a little bit of crossover between what cameras you'd use and how you would shoot something in computer as there is for live action. So that was cool to figure out. So it wasn't as big a shift as it might have been otherwise. Like other Mission Impossible movies, they started out with a bunch of action sequences that they want to do, and they would figure out the storylines that connect them all later. So that, of course, that generates a lot of confusion and chaos, and they weren't sure how they would do it. So they had their locations and they had their big action sequences, and they shot a lot of the connecting tissue for those in between in Vancouver. So there's some, I'll get to it when I talk about the tidbits and some of the other stuff, but there were some interesting deleted scenes that are available where it's clear they didn't know where they were going with this. And they had to redo the scene once they figured it out a little bit. And that's one of the reasons why Chris McQuarrie was brought on and then Damon Lindelof was brought on, is to help them connect these things in ways that made sense.
Because the writers were lost.
Of course, McQuarrie would go on to then be the helm for the rest of the series. He would go on to direct and write the rest of the movies in the series going forward, but he first got involved in this one. Basic plot summary. The IMF is shut down when it's implicated in the bombing of the Kremlin, causing Ethan Hunt and his new team to go rogue to clear their organization's name. So that's the basic plot. IMF shut down. They just have the contents of their team and the train car, which we'll get to, and they've got to figure out how to stop a nuclear madman. Observations. What do you think about it?
My main observation is that the movie is slick. It's just, and we started to see this with the third one, but even more so with this. And I think Tom Cruise is absolutely right that Brad Bird was prepared to do an action movie.
Yeah.
I will say the reason why I went to see this in the theater, and this is the first one that I remember seeing in the theater from the series, was because of Brad Bird, because I really liked what he had done. I love The Iron Giant. It's one of my favorite animated movies. I really enjoyed The Incredibles. Ratatouille is awesome.
Yeah.
And so I was really very intrigued to see what he was going to do
Hmm.
with the live action movie, and I thought that he was well capable of pulling it off.
Yeah.
And uh, it's just a really solid action
Hmm.
movie. It's good.
Yeah. This to me is the movie. Mission Impossible 3 firmed up the foundation. And this is the movie where they finally nailed their format. They finally nailed this is what a Mission Impossible movie is. This is what it feels like. This is what it's going to be going forward. They finally got to that place where they figured out what this series is, what this franchise is, and what it can offer. This is the movie that did that. It needed stabilized in 3, and that's exactly what they brought. J.J. Abrams brought. This was where they took advantage of that foundation and built something incredible. This is when it started becoming one of the best action franchises in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it begins here. And that's the main larger takeaway from this film is that this was the one that really captured what these movies would be going forward.
And to me, this feels like a continuation of what happened in 3.
Yeah.
Too. Even though it's different directors, it feels like the same style. And I think that they established that, and that's what allowed them to shift from director to director.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we've had in the newer ones the same team running things, but I think it was important for that and for McQuarrie to be a part of that in this movie, because it's from 3 on, they seem much more connected.
Yeah.
1 and 2 seem kind of disjointed from each other, and
they're
like 2
completely
different
standalone movies.
Yeah,
for sure. For me, the first time I saw this movie was actually interesting. Christmas 2011, like middle of that month, I came down with appendicitis and had to have my appendix removed. And then I got an infection in the wound. And so I was actually living at my parents' house because I needed somebody to be there to like take care of me at the moment. And this was the first time I got out of the house to go do anything. I think it was Steve Glarum, another one of our friends. We had a small group of friends, came, picked me up, and took me to the IMAX theater to go see Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol in IMAX. It was like my first time really out of the house doing anything fun since I had an appendectomy.
I mean, movies are the most important thing we do. So
it is. So if that doesn't say, but tonally, Brad Bird really wanted to nail the tone in this movie. He had a very clear thing about what he wanted for tone. And that movement between humor and action and seriousness and the way they shift back and forth seamlessly. I mean, it clearly was an intentional tone and nailed it. Mm-hmm. Just nailed the humor, nailed the dramatic tension action, along with the drama and the intense plot. Tonally, it's brilliant and possibly the best realized version of this particular tone, the best mix of the humor and the action and the tension and the drama. Really, really well done on that front. Brad Bird uses inspiration for the tone movies like Raiders of the Lost Ark. In particular, he was in an interview, I was doing research on this, an interview, he was saying that he looked at Raiders of the Lost Ark and that scene where like the sword guy comes out, he's flipping the sword around, and then Harrison Ford just goes and shoots him, and then everyone's laughing. And like 2 seconds later, I was like right before, right after, like you think Marion dies. And so like that shift between something super sad and serious and the humor was so well done in Raiders. And that was the tone he was going for. And I think he nailed it.
Yeah. I mean, one example I can think of specifically is during this huge opening set piece where they're in this prison, he's breaking out, and there's all this tension and violence and stuff, and Benji can't get the one door open, and Tom Cruise is just standing there like
sitting there waiting for him, like, come on. Like, no, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. Yeah. And like they settled on that right from the beginning, and it was really cool. I think my favorite moment of that is in the Burj Khalifa, which we'll get to that later. But that scene where after this dramatic thing where they have to like pull him back into the hotel room, and like he's just been climbing on the outside of the tallest building in the world, and Benji comes in from having changed the floor number. He's like, oh man, that was difficult, that was tough, oh man, I made it though, I made it, I did it. Like that tonal shift is so good, and that humor injection is so well done, that I like, it's why we'll have at the end of this series, we'll come back and rank order them. But this is in the mix for me as the best one because of that mixture.
Yeah.
Other observations?
We've talked about how they wanted to expand the international presence, and obviously, in 2, it's all based in one international place.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But in this one, you've got major scenes set up in very distinct locations. And the Dubai thing is fascinating. And I know that, one of the hallmarks of the series is that they do mostly their own stunts, but this is the first one I can remember where there was like a bunch of hype around, like he's actually climbing on the actual building. Yeah. It's an insane person.
Yeah.
It kind of marketing for Tom Cruise, which is true and has continued through the series, like as it goes along. Like every movie that's come out Mission Impossible wise, they've gone out of the way to showcase like something particularly nuts he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this was the first one that I remember them showcasing like something specific.
For sure. And this is the one where it really took that to the next level. Took that Tom Cruise doing his own stunts and taking the stunts to the next level. Like it really did. It elevated what you could think about doing or contemplate doing in an action film, especially with using your main star, and is something that has absolutely continued to become an iconic hallmark of the franchise.
To the point where we're like fairly certain Tom Cruise will die doing possible at some point.
Just a few observations about the film itself. This is the first one where none of the team uses a mask. There's only one mask in the entire film, and it's used by the bad guy. No masks for the entire team, which is quite a change after 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Which went a little bit mask crazy. Another theme throughout this one is that they have all these high-tech gadgets, and they all constantly fail. And this is something Brad Bird wanted to bring into it, is that the technology is all very cool, but all of it doesn't work. I mean, you see this throughout. It starts like right with the mission briefing, like it's supposed to self-destruct and then doesn't.
Yeah.
And Tom Cruise has to walk up and hammer the phone to get it destroyed. When they're in the Kremlin, it takes too long for the profiles to load, and they almost get caught by the guards. The screen, that little screen they use, screws up at one point. Their climbing gloves fail when he's up out on the wall. The mask machine dies in the middle of making the masks, and the magnetic catch machine later breaks. So this is like a constant running theme throughout the movie, is that all their cool technology doesn't really work how it's supposed to. And this is the only movie to date where the bad guy in the movie is not a current or former IMF agent. Only one in the series. So, I mean, I don't know what that says about IMF's recruiting practices, but yeah. All right. So strengths and weaknesses of the movie. What would you point out as strengths? I mean, obviously we've hit on some of them, but strengths and weaknesses.
I think I've already talked about all the things that
and it could be more specific if there are specific strengths or weaknesses.
Yeah, I think that the cast, again, we've talked about this in other movies, but the composition of the cast is a major strength. And I mentioned this as we talked through Mission Impossible 3, that we would see more of Simon Pegg's character. And I think that probably some people were wondering if he had the ability to have an expanded role, but I think he nails it. And I think giving him the freedom to have more of a voice and more of a role in this movie is one of his major strengths.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite things throughout the movie is this running joke about how badly he wants to use a mask and never can. Like he's walking in the Kremlin complaining that he's not, he doesn't get to wear a mask. So that's a cool running gag. But yeah, his his greater inclusion has been to the series' benefit for sure.
But I like how they established, like, after that whole thing, they are like talking back and forth to each other in Russian. So like they're also establishing that he's not just some slacker who's like just some computer genius. He's like he's actually involved in this. He's invested in this. He's done the work to be a part of this. He just happens to be a funny guy.
Yeah. How cool is the train car they get?
Yeah.
I love that train car. I mean, visually set up, that particular set is fantastic. Like it's the coolest, the coolest thing of all compartments and super high tech thing. I would love to have a train car.
I mean, I'm a sucker. Also, another thing that I thought was a strength. I'm a sucker for scenes happening synchronously. So in Dubai, in the hotel where they've got two separate meetings going on at the same time with two people pretending to be two people and the other two people pretending to be the other two people they're supposed to meet. Yeah. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. And, I want to talk more about that on memorable scenes.
Very well written.
Yeah. The whole Burj Khalifa was just fantastic. Yeah, most of the stuff I've talked about, spectacular visuals in this movie, the humor perfectly timed out, and the stunts took it to the next level, which we talked about earlier. Like the strengths in this movie are very, very high and very well done. Weaknesses. What anything that came up in your weaknesses?
I mean, I don't really know if it's like it's hard to say weaknesses for this movie. It's a really good movie, but maybe in comparison to some of the other ones, it doesn't have as well defined or as menacing of a villain as like Mission Impossible 3. Yeah. It does. It's not Philip Seymour Hoffman in this role. It's a very it's almost like a paint by numbers, very template kind of bad guy. Yeah. Maybe that makes it so there's not as much of emotional stakes or impact. Like what they're trying to do, but it doesn't seem I don't know if this is fair, but to me, like it didn't really ever seem like you expected the bad guy to succeed. Yeah. As opposed to some of the other ones.
Though in reality, he came much closer to succeeding than most of the other bad guys.
Interesting. So maybe they want us to be underestimating the whole time.
Yeah, I think most of the negative things about this surround the villain character. They underutilize Michael Nyqvist. Apparently, you can see a deleted scene where they actually were originally going to begin the opening of the film with Michael Nyqvist and doing one of his rants about things, which they eventually redid and showed a little bit when they're in their train car scene. But they really underutilized him, including one of the scenes that you later find out is him is the Burj Khalifa scene. But like it's a different actor playing that role, even though that's supposed to be that character. Like, so his character itself was really underutilized. Apparently they did shoot a bunch more scenes with him, but they just didn't quite work right. And as they rewrote the script, it just didn't fit in as well. So I think that's the biggest negative on that front. The other thing I think too was at one point they rope in another arms dealer, like Bogdan comes back as in between Dubai, the Dubai scene and the India scene. They rope in this other arms dealer, and that guy is always kind of like, did they need to go that direction? How exactly? It seemed like an extra layer of complexity that maybe wasn't necessary. I know that bringing Bogdan back was one of Chris McQuarrie's rewrites. To try and get things to work. So maybe it was the only way they could get things to work. But that character seemed like a little extra and added layer of complexity that maybe wasn't needed. But that's it. I mean, very minor stuff, honestly. All right, memorable scenes.
Climbing the outside of the tallest building in the world.
Yes. This scene is, I mean, we'll do 1, 2 on the best scenes across the entire series, but this is high up on the list. This is one of the coolest scenes I've ever seen. It's still the tallest building in the world. A little bit of background on this. J.J. Abrams was in Dubai, and a couple of his guys were in Dubai to promote Star Trek in 2009. And when they saw Dubai and when they saw this movie, like, we got to figure out how to do something here. And Mission Impossible, the first one to come up with this. And be like, oh no, this is great. I think there's the climbing scene is a little bit of ode to 1 and 3, who have very epic climbing scenes. You know, the one descending down to the CIA and the Shanghai swing. So I think there's a little bit of an ode to both of those films in this one. But man, is it spectacular. And the way they filmed it, and they used IMAX cameras for this too. And so you get such an incredible sense of space on this one, and how high the Burj Khalifa is, how far up he is. And especially when you realize, like, no, that's Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
He's actually climbing on the outside of this building. It's incredible.
I'm always fascinated by things set in Russia. And, obviously they weren't actually inside the Kremlin.
Yeah.
But it was cool to kind of imagine what that would be like.
Almost all those scenes were shot in Prague, actually.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, they did some like second team B-roll work in Russia, but almost all the Russia scenes were actually shot in Prague. What's cool about this is, like, watching, you got to watch some of the special features on the Dubai thing, because, like, they're talking about Brad Bird, like they were having conversations about how they want to do this and how they want to do that, and the whole time, like, Tom Cruise is like out on the wire, hanging like 130 stories out, and like he's just hanging out there outside on the outside of this building. And then finally, like at one point, like he just pushes off and just goes swinging around the building on this high wire. And they're like, wait, what? Wait, what's going on? No, wait, Tom's still out there. Okay. But I mean, the whole setup they had to do this, and like Tom Cruise is just fearless. It's crazy how high he was up in this building. They actually had, at that time, they had some unfinished floors in the Burj, so they were able to use some of the unfinished floors, so they weren't having to destroy a whole bunch of things. So all the interior shots where they're actually in the hotel room, they built like a replica, like 3-story replica next door to film like the interior stuff, and then they used the actual Burj Khalifa for all the outside shooting. And the scene where he's actually hanging from the building, and all 3 of them are like hanging onto each other. They use the actual Burj for that.
Wow.
But like when he lets go and like bangs off the window, like that's on the replica, and all the interior stuff is on the replica. But they originally got permission from the hotel to knock out 1 window. And then they ended up knocking out somewhere between 26 and 37 windows. They just kept going back. Can we knock another one out? Can we knock another one out? Can we knock another one out? They were just knocking windows out of this thing. And like here, I'm thinking like they like carefully removed them. No, they literally just broke all the windows. And they were like, yeah, we could really only do this in a place like Dubai, which has very loose governmental structure and like all this stuff. It was just kind of like moving forward. Just such a cool scene. And moving on to that one, like the actual, you were talking about this earlier, the actual exchange scene is fantastic. It's so well shot. The idea that a meeting is happening in 2 different locations with 2 sets of imposters is so cool. It's such a cool scene. Other memorable scenes.
I mean, most of the movie is memorable.
It is.
Honestly. Like you said, we're gonna rate them at the end. This is high final, which is the reason.
Yeah.
And it'll be high up on my list too.
Yeah, it's really high. It's really hot in here. Yeah.
We know. We know.
Yes.
I picked a bad day to wear my winter hat, but I had to represent.
Yes, we were remarking on the fact that
it's actually very cold out there. I can feel it.
The room we're recording in is really warm today.
It doesn't help that we're so hot too.
It does not. All right. I'll say real briefly, I really like the Mumbai scene, which was actually also shot in Dubai. Apparently all the extras are just like Dubai rich people that were just hanging out, and then they had a terrible time like working with those people because they just thought it was cool to be in a movie.
Yeah.
But after they're there for like 2 days, they're like, all right, this is worn off. The novelty's worn off. All right. So let's go into a few facts and interesting tidbits. This is one of the only ones to use a full title sequence, they went back to the light the fuse. Like Tom Cruise literally says light the fuse, and they do their title credits with the snake fuse weaving through, and it actually shows scenes throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, it was very, very James Bond.
Yes. Skyfall in particular did that. Although Skyfalls were done kind of in animation, where these are actually like clips of the actual scenes that they use. The henchman from the first movie was back in this one. That when he goes to meet the arms dealer outside of Dubai, that blonde-haired long guy was the same guy who was the henchman for Vanessa Redgrave's character Max in the first one, and they give him the same shroud with the ski mask with the eyes closed, and they make a little joke about it. Originally, they were this close to being able to get Vanessa Redgrave to come back and be the arms dealer in that scene, but it just didn't work out. The studio basically didn't want to pay for her, so they couldn't do it, but they brought the henchman back. The prison scene, that entire prison scene was made up on location because the prison ended up being different than what they thought it was going to be, and what they originally had intended wasn't going to work. So they literally like made it up as they went along there. The bouncing rock, when Ethan's sitting there at the beginning of the movie bouncing the rock up, that was an ode to The Great Escape, the movie The Great Escape, the Cooler King. Originally, like, this was the point where like Tom Cruise was like at his lowest point in his career, where everyone thought he was done and were trying to like push him out of movies. The original version of this film was supposed to have Ethan become the secretary at the end and possibly turn the franchise over to Jeremy Renner. Was the original kind of version of this movie that basically they ended up not doing properly. But I think it's kind of funny because this was kind of the second. There were like two action franchises that were going to be turned over to Jeremy Renner and then weren't with the Bourne franchise. So that's kind of funny.
And what's interesting about that too is that in no way did Jeremy Renner underperform in either of those. In fact, he might have been the best part of both those movies.
It's possible.
And yet he still didn't. It's okay. He got to be Hawkeye.
And it was cool. Michael Giacchino, who did the score for this one, took the Mission Impossible themes and tailored them to the music of the country they were in. So you hear that recurring motif, but you hear it kind of in the music. I thought it was really well done and really did a good job of setting the scenes there. So that's a few facts and tidbits about Ghost Protocol.
So yeah, just a couple more thoughts I had, like memorable lines. This, more than any of them so far, had a couple that stuck out to me that I remember dying at seeing the first time, and they're still funny to me. When they first break out of the prison and Bogdan says to him, "Sergey, are you not Russian?" And then like a minute later, he's like, "Sergey, are you not Sergey?"
I don't know if it's the producer. It might have been the producer. It might have been Brad Bird talked about this in an interview I was listening to, where like they were just getting random people who were in Prague, who were actors in Prague, to play some of these roles. And like this guy apparently went in, he's like, "I am the greatest actor in all of Prague." And it like stuck out in Brad Bird's mind. And he's like, "Give me the guy who's the greatest actor in Prague." And then so he's originally supposed to be just in that scene, but he did such a good job, and they liked this character that when Chris McQuarrie did the rewrite, they brought him back, and he ends up having a big role in the movie.
And I love when Simon Pegg's character says, "I thought you said break into the Kremlin." Like and then there's like, "It's what we're doing." Like, oh.
Yeah, so many good scenes. Or when Jeremy Renner, after he gets out of the vent in Dubai, is like, "Next time I get to seduce the rich guy." Just great scenes. All right, so that is our wrap up of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. In a couple weeks, we will come back to do Rogue Nation. Now we'll finish off with our watch list, movies we watched over the past week. Rob, what'd you watch?
So I watched Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and I'm going to watch The Boogeyman tonight. But I also watched Marcel the Shell with Shoes On.
Okay, this is one you were looking forward to.
Interested in possibly going to see the theater, but never got to. And I watched it with my son and daughter, and they both really liked it
Hmm.
a lot. And I think that it's a very good movie for families who want to watch a movie with families. There's something for everybody in it, and it's been very well received. It's at a massively high score on Rotten Tomatoes audience score, and it just seems like people who watch it really enjoy it. And
Yeah.
I thought it was funny and touching and just clever and quirky. If you've seen the YouTube videos at all, it's just like an extension of them, which is really cool. And they actually like are interviewed in the movie by 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
Like Leslie Stahl actually comes to their house and interviews them.
I think I saw it in the trailer.
And it's pretty cool. Very cool. So
Yes.
Marcel the Shell with shoes on.
Okay. I got to see Fast X finally. It was pretty much what I was anticipating. They did leave it at a cliffhanger because they had 2 more movies coming. I still don't know how they're gonna, they just kind of keep doing what they do and rinse and repeat. It was actually not quite as far out as the previous one. That doesn't mean it was not ridiculous.
No cars going to outer space in this
No
one.
outer space.
Although there was a neutron atomic bomb rolling through the streets of Rome, smashing the Vatican.
There was. That was kind of funny.
No.
You know what you're gonna get with these movies. So if you like the Fast and Furious action movies, you get more.
I will say like a highlight of this movie to me is Jason Momoa's character, because he is hilarious.
At first, I'm like, all right, this is being overacted. It's being tremendously overacted. Then you start to get, okay, all right, I see what they're going for here.
Yeah, he's very I would say he's very Channing Tatum-esque in this role. The macho buff guy who's also very in touch with his feminine side, I would say.
Specifically Channing Tatum and Bullet Train.
Yes.
That's another. Also, last night my wife and I watched Ticket to Paradise, the latest movie between Julia Roberts and George Clooney, where they are exes who hate each other, who end up in Bali because their daughter's going to marry a native guy, and they try to talk her out of it. And so basically, I mean, it's I would say a typical romantic comedy type movie. It's a good family drama. There's a lot of decent dialogue scenes in it. And the standout part of this movie is they shoot at tremendously beautiful locations in Bali. It's basically, hey, let's go to all these incredibly beautiful places and let's just shoot scenes there. So Ticket to Paradise, if you need a date night movie, romantic comedy, it's currently on Amazon Prime. So that's
I just looked it up. I would say Marcel the Shell with shoes on is one of the few movies I've ever seen that has a 98% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes and a 90% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. That is not common. No. So must have done something right.
Yes. All right. Well, that is the show. Thank you for checking out Film for Fans. Make sure you go to filmforfans.com, where all of our Mission Impossible reviews to this point are up. Actually, let's just say 1 and 2 are up. I will be working on 3 this week. I'm like 1 behind where we do on the podcast. But that'll be up soon. So 1 and 2's reviews are up on the website. Make sure you tell your friends about the podcast. Thank you. And until next time, enjoy the movie.